Awesome, Matt. Thank you so much for that lead in. How appropriate on this 30 day. So, hello everyone, and welcome to Digital Feedback and Assessment Technology with Oldham County Schools. And I'll be leading the show for you today. So I'm super excited. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt so you can do some introductions.
Yes, hello everybody. Happy Thurby, which I know is gaining in popularity. It's not necessarily the best weather for it, but I'm sure there are some horses out there that like to be in the slop today. Super excited for our show. So let's get right into it. So let's talk about our panel. We have Elaine Abernathy here from she's a digital innovation leader for JCPS, and she's also running the show behind the scenes for us. We have Dana Dowdy, who's a digital learning coach in Graves County Schools, who is going to hop on right after I go through this here. We have Danielle Washburn, who I believe is chat side. I don't see her on here. She's also a digital innovation leader for JCPS, just as well as Kathleen Receiver, who's here with us as well, who works for digital innovation. We also have a couple of guest panelists with us today. We have Jerry Broyles from Fayette County, and a digital learning coach. And then we have Kaylee Irvin from Bullitt County, who is also a digital learning coach. So welcome and thank you for being with us. We do know that STLP state announcements and stuff are still going on. So if you're watching that, please feel free to come back and watch us after we're done. We're on demand. We're Kentucky Go Digital. We always have that power pause for you later. But we do appreciate you being here with us today. So if you're joining us on YouTube Live, we're super happy to be here. Dana will be taking questions from you in the YouTube Live chat, so make sure you drop in there, introduce yourself, and let us know what county or state you're from. If you don't have the chat capability right now, make sure you log into YouTube, and while you're there, check that subscribe button for us too, so you can easily continue to learn with us.
She's the digital learning coach here in Oldham County. We have Andy Marks, who is a teacher from LaGrange Elementary, and Grace Yan from Elementary VLA. So these ladies understand the power of digital feedback and assessment, even in the middle of a pandemic. So welcome to everybody, and let's get started sharing, ladies.
Yeah, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today, whether you are live or watching that recording later. Let me go ahead. I would like to share my started and some reflections for today. So in order to combine present and feedback, I'd like to ask the panel questions to kind of get us rolled up on those topics.
Just a second, Lauren, can you Sandra, how are you?
Giving you feedback over the past year.
Sandra, can you
just get everybody muted? Elaine, do we have everybody muted now so Lauren can get started?
We are still missing. I think Sandra needs to mute.
Sandra's trying to get off.
Oh, okay. No worries. We're glad to have you, though.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm making. There it goes. Now let's see if I can get out of here. How do I close it up? There we go.
Awesome. Oh, okay. All right, Lauren, we're ready for you.
Okay. So my first question that I just really wanted to ask the panel was, how has your practice on assessing students and giving them feedback changed over this past year?
Hey, Lauren, will you real quick try to screen share for us?
Sure.
Sorry about that. All right, so how has it changed over this past year, assessments, huh? There we go, now we see it.
There we go. Well, I would start off by saying what hasn't changed over the course of this past year. It seems like literally everything that we're doing, not just in education, but even personally, has had a huge shift when we think about where we were last March and now. So I think that assessing and feedback has been one of the things that has changed the most to me when I'm visiting teachers in their classrooms. In a regular year pre-pandemic, I would see them conferring with students, just getting close to a kid, listening in, asking questions in the moment and giving them feedback that way. But now obviously things are looking different. So we've tried to be kind of creative here in Bullitt County with how we're doing that. So one thing that we've really tried to do is make good use of our breakout rooms, whether we're in a Google Meet or a Zoom. Just wherever we're meeting with our students live and kind of using those breakout features to pull those students like we would if we were in the traditional classroom, and then giving them that one-on-one feedback or even small group feedback while the rest of the class is working on maybe a more independent type task. So that's been one way that we've tried to make that shift here in Bullitt County. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I like how you are talking about, it doesn't matter, which type of situation, or whether you're synchronous, asynchronous, but, pulling those small groups, having those breakouts, having them in the moment to still have that conferring, to hear their conversation, to assess them, but still be able to give them feedback as an educator as well. Let's go ahead and look at our second question in the panel. What digital tools come to mind when you think of assessment and feedback when teaching, whether you are virtual, in person, or hybrid? Kind of what were your tried and true tools this past year?
I would definitely say conferences. I can't talk. When the pandemic first started, we really started thinking about learning management systems here in Bullitt County. And so we are a Google district here, so we already had things like Google Classroom and that sort of stuff in place, especially for our middle highs. But then when we were able to get our elementary students one-to-one with Chromebooks at the beginning of the pandemic, we had to really shift our focus and think, okay, how are we going to get instruction to those kiddos? So what we decided to do was use our Google platform, so Google Classroom for grades 3 and above. And then we also adopted Seesaw at the beginning of the school year this year for our K-2s. So that has been super helpful, especially when you think about the types of assessment and feedback that you need to give to young learners. Seesaw has been pretty groundbreaking for us here because you're able to see them, like they have all these drawing tools, they can speak to record. Seesaw is pretty comprehensive when it comes to what you can get from your students, so that's been super helpful. And then it also has things built in like verbal feedback, so instead of typing or writing feedback to students, teachers can just speak and record their voice, and that gets sent directly to students and families. So that's been one thing that we've been using, especially with our littles, to kind of bridge that homeschool gap, especially when we were all virtual, and even now we're still continuing to use it, and it's been really great for us. I would say other things that I've seen a lot during the pandemic are those tried and true tools that we use kind of all the time, things like Google Forms, using the quizzes feature there to give them that automatic feedback on how they progressed. Things like Flipgrid, where you can hear from every student. So just trying to make use of the tools that we already knew and not necessarily throwing all brand new things to our teachers, but just kind of showing them how they can use these things that they already know and their students already know to give them that assessment data and then give feedback to their kiddos that way.
And Kaylee, I love what you just said, just not throwing a bunch of new tools at our teachers and our students, but using those tools that they were already familiar with and then building on those and learning to use them many times in different ways. So I really like that.
Yes, I wanted to also talk about that as well, that she said that starting with the familiar, there was a lot going on during this past year. And so if you start with something familiar, like she mentioned, even just using the learning management system, like Google Classroom has naturally built-in tools, or Seesaw, and leveraging those management systems to assess your students and give them feedback, that was powerful. Or she even mentioned tools, tried and true tools like Google Forms and Flipgrid, a variety of options as well. And so with Forms, yes, you can have different multimedia inside of it as well, or text and options, but then that Flipgrid, gives students a voice by using either the video or even the mic only option that they have now. So also giving our students choice, I think, when assessing them and giving them feedback as well is helpful. So thanks for sharing that. All right, that kind of leads me into kind of talking about our journey here in Oldham County, since we have many presenters here, but just because this is our Oldham County journey with assessment and feedback and the shift on that in the past year, I'm sure all of you experience the same thing no matter what district you're from, whether you're K through 12. But if you tuned in a few weeks ago, you may remember hearing from one of our digital learning coaches, her name's Rosalind Manning, about our journey and that shift in learning environment. This kind of caused us to shift the way we also assessed and gave our students feedback from the past, but then also thinking about from our perspective, how we are going to support our teachers with this. And so just like everybody else, we did start off, in person. Everything was normal back in March of 2020. We shifted very quickly on March 16th into that virtual learning. And for us, into the school year. And for us, this was really something different because we had never implemented that NTI model before. Whereas I know some districts, kind of had a plan in place for NTI, whether it was inclement weather or other things like that. But that was not something we had previously done. So this was a brand new learning experience for all of us. And then now, starting in August, we kind of call it a hybrid learning. We have people learning in many different ways. Elementary started back in person in late August and then moved in and out of NTI flexibly as needed. Middle and high, like most middle and highs, they had an AB schedule until after spring break, and now all of our students are back. And then we still offer that optional, all students K through 12 might be still participating in a virtual learning academy. And so it kind of looks different here in Oldham County. So we kind of had to think about, okay, that shift in learning environment, and knowing though that importance of assessment and feedback made us kind of shift and reflect on how we want to share with our staff for professional learning opportunities. We decided from the professional level to go ahead and still provide them those best tools and best practices, but thinking more digitally, tools to assess and give students that feedback, because that's important that we always assess our students so we can gauge where they're at, and also to use that data in order to reflect on our instruction and plan. But then also, it doesn't matter what learning environment you're from, you have to still do those best practices. So we knew it had to look different. So we decided on having a professional learning series, and one in particular that we focused on for 4 weeks straight was this digital assessment and feedback. And we knew that it needed to look different for our teachers because they're in all sorts of environments. We have people still teaching remotely. We still have our VLA teachers that we need to help out. We still have hybrid teachers that are doing a little bit of both with that AB scheduling. And then also we have those in-person teachers who still have their students, but at times they need to be socially distanced, and there are some restrictions on use of materials. So some of our assessments might need to look different, and the way that we give them feedback as well. So we have these sessions available for them. As you can see here, we focused on different tools each night, and then had one for them to kind of take with them. And then so we were able to host those via Google Meet remotely, and then also record them to have for later. So that's kind of the way we shifted as a department with thinking about digital assessment and feedback and getting that information out to our teachers. So, but because of that shift, I do also want us to think about, though, the research and the importance on assessment still. So this is a quote from a professional text called the Distance Learning Playbook, grades K through 12. And as you can see, Fisher, Fry, and Hattie here state, it's not really the assessment that what's important, but it's how you use the assessment to inform your instruction. So while Grace and while Andy present today on their digital tools, I want you to be thinking about this. How can I use this digital tool to assess my students, no matter what type of learning environment I'm teaching from, to inform your instruction? And the same thing with feedback. We know how important feedback is. I'm sure you're all very familiar with John Hattie, that well-known researcher of education. He's done many, many studies on education. And he says that feedback shows an effect size of 0.73, which is very effective and is considered one of the top 10 influences on student achievement. So let's also remember the importance in research on feedback as we hear from them today, and think about those digital tools and how we can use them to give that effective feedback to our students. So in today's show, we're going to look at some tried and true tools specifically that you can use tomorrow with your students. We're going to start off with Miss Grace Yan, and she's going to lead us on her journey with using Google Workspace tools for education. And then following, we'll have Andy Marks, and she's going to follow with Classkick. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Grace.
Hi. All right, let me share my screen here. And I teach 4th grade at the Virtual Learning Academy based out of Kenwood Station in Oldham County. And I have been virtual the entire year with that. I started off with a large classroom of students, and I needed tools that would allow me to quickly assess and quickly give feedback to them. So I started out this journey using Google Forms. And when I started this, I loved Google Forms. I could pace it out, almost having a website feel to it. I had a check-in for how they were doing for the day. I could pace it and differentiate where I had the conditional questions, and if they needed some additional help, I could push them depending where their learning needs were. But what I found with that, while it was a great assessment tool for me, they weren't getting the feedback that I was hoping for that would come out of that. While I could push out the automatic scoring on it, and I could provide individual feedback on it, there were several steps for my 4th graders to get to that feedback. It would send a link in their email, but then they would have to go through and look at it. And I found that many simply weren't doing that. So I needed something that would definitely work with that situation. So after I brainstormed, I tried out some of these same strategies that I built in with the Google Forms in Google Slides instead. With the Google Slides, it was something that they had already known. Is something that we used for other lessons, and they used as 3rd graders when they were finishing out NTI. So the format was something familiar. It was something I had used before too, so I was familiar. So it took some of the learning curve out of that. And being, for the first time, a virtual only teacher, that was comforting using something that was familiar with that. So in my Google Slides, what I found with pushing out a whole week's of work, students would rush ahead and do a whole week on Monday if they could. So that wasn't going to work out. I found a Google Chrome add-on called Slip and Slide, and it allows you to push individual slides when you want them to go out. So I build my lessons for the week, but I can push out. So today I only pushed out Thursday's lessons for them, but it adds it to that whole slide deck. They can go back and reflect on that. And as I'm going to show you in just a minute, this is where I'm able to give them feedback. They reply back to me, and it has worked out beautifully so far. So I have a few examples to show just kind of the process of what I do with this. So this is an example of a writing slide packet that I have. And I build them visually similar. I color code them per day so they can easily see Monday slides are blue, Tuesday sides are green, Wednesdays pink, and so on. So when I go in, they have an overview of the week, and then they go in for the day's lesson. So on Monday, they will only see to this last blue slide at the bottom. And when I go down here, I have an example of what it might look like when I give the feedback for the student. So the student here was supposed to, and this is an example I made, the instructions were to underline several things. So I noticed that they needed to go back and make a correction. So Susie student here, I have directed them to make a correction. So what I do is I type my notes in the speaker notes down here. Then I highlight them and I tag them in it. So that sends an alert to their email, which we've practiced doing so they know to look at their email, that they have a new alert. They also know to be on the lookout for these icons out to the side that they have a new comment waiting for them there. Within these slides, I also have the ability to still link things in. So I haven't totally, not everything is on the slide. While some things are interactive, I still can link different items from, say, a Google Classroom assignment, a formative assessment that I want to score separately from these daily participation slides. So that has been really helpful also, and still being able to use those forms when I need that really quick check-in. I like at the end of the week being able to have this full slide deck for two reasons. I'm able to look back on how they progressed as a learner, and I have them look back on how they've progressed as a learner also. So this is an example. I made an example of what I might type on a student slide. On Fridays, we have a formative Friday, and I give them feedback on what I noticed throughout the week, items from one-on-one or small group conferences that we've discussed. I might make a note of this here. Reading goals, writing goals could go in here. And then the student is supposed to write their own reflections. So they go back through the slide deck and look at how they've grown as a learner, reflect on that. Some students type, like the example I typed here. Many of them link a video in this, so they can talk that way, almost in a Flipgrid style video. And they've really enjoyed that as well. I'll go back here to my social studies slide. And I'm able to include collaboration in this also. When I do these, I put them in Google Classroom and share a copy to each student. So each student has their own slide deck for the week. They work directly on their slides. But when I want them to work together on this, I can link, say, to a Jamboard. So on this slide, the day before, they went to a Jamboard and had a group discussion with these Post-its here. Then it was my springboard for the following day's lesson. So I've enjoyed that about using the slides as well.
Grace, I hadn't seen that actual use of the comments and showing them to do it to look for them on the left. I hadn't seen that at all, and that's really it's just like, duh, I've never seen that, so thank you. Can you go back over that add-on that you talked about just a moment ago? Was that part of how you stopped them from seeing the entire slide deck?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and before, that's in a separate screen, so I wanted to show this really quick.
Yeah.
I actually started that this week. I'm prompting them to go back and tell me something in the speaker notes also. So we have I've made this conversation up, but I have back and forth conversation from the students coming in now that I can go back and look, and I can look on this little icon and say, oh, Susie student has replied back because they're supposed to tag me in this, so I get the alert, and that's been very helpful. And I'm sure many of us have seen the blurry picture be posted, so I can go back. Please put a clear picture and we get that fixed. So the add-on is extremely helpful. This was a game changer for me. So it's called Slip and Slide. And it's, when I go to the add-on, it prompts, and then you select which slide you want to go out. So that's actually taking a little bit too much time. So this is my blank template that I build my lessons off of each week. So I have the framework, but blank slides. So I put in the lessons, and then
Had anybody else heard that about that add-on? Is it just me? I had not heard about that yet, and so that's really neat.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard it either.
It was a going down the rabbit hole find when I was trying to figure out how to just send one thing, because I have tried sending out per day, like a slide deck per day. But what I found is that they're not going back in that slide deck. Once they turn it in, it's turned in, and it was difficult for me to get students to look at how they progressed. And it can be clunky with multiple tabs open to be able to look how they progress. So with this whole stream, it's worked beautifully with that. So I just select the slides. On Monday, I create an assignment with just Monday slides. And then Tuesday, it's not a new assignment. I just push out Tuesday slides, and then Wednesday push out.
So I realize this is actually going to solve one of the issues that I've seen in my own students at home, that if there is a group assignment, the teacher would keep continuing to attach that to a new assignment, and even though it's the same assignment, and then they would almost really lose what they had done previously. They'd have to go find it in the previous slide deck. So that is a huge game changer. So thank you, goodness.
Okay, and I have these blank lesson templates loaded on here also for anybody to click on with that.
And this slide deck is actually going to be linked into the video after it's on demand, so make sure that you check that out too below.
And like, I just would also say, like Elaine said, I love how this, and Grace mentioned this too, that this is something familiar. She knew how to use slides, her students knew how to use slides, but this allowed her to embed multiple ways also in, I guess, kind of like App Smash, and put in, whether she wants to put in a Google form, it can still be there under a slide, but the students know to go here to these slides every week, or she can put in a Flipgrid link or any other way, or you can embed a video right here. And so it gave her that window of opportunity to use multiple different types of assessment all here within slides, and then still giving the feedback. It's just like a one-stop shop. And so that was probably something familiar in such an unfamiliar time. So I really like the way that you use Google Slides to do that, Grace.
And I like how she talked about her shift too as an educator based on the needs of her kids, right? Like that's what all great educators do. That's what all of us here today do. We take something and we're like, okay, I like that, but we can tweak it and make it a little bit better for everybody involved. So I liked hearing that part of your story too, Grace.
And Grace, I wanted, you're teaching your students how to do that workflow of going back and forth, which is what really you kind of do in the workplace as well. So you're already giving them, you're upskilling them through that way too. So I love it.
Grace, I love how you made this a two-way conversation with your students. Feedback we often think of as what the teacher is going to tell the student. But really, to do that well, we have to understand where the students are and what they know before we can give them appropriate feedback. And the way that you have the slides as a back and forth two-way conversation is great. It's a nice layout.
I had used that in Google Docs for writing feedback, going back and forth, where I tag a certain section, leave my feedback, the student will respond back to me, make changes, and we that's where that idea had come from. So I just implemented that within the slide deck, and it's really been helpful since I started that.
So, Lauren, I'm not sure if you were going to introduce Andy, but before we do that, I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions for Grace before we jump over to Andy and Classkick.
We currently don't have one on the chat, but if you're watching live, just make sure that you drop in who you are and where you were from, and then any questions that you have for this panel for sure.
Brandy did comment that she really did like the Jamboard from the day before to activate the prior knowledge. So that was to kick off that next day's lesson. So that was good feedback there.
And I just wanted to say too, I think that so many times we find fun or, neat tools to use, but the fact that I just loved your, the slides that you have for every day, like you said, and then you're giving those students that immediate, well, not immediate, but feedback for them to read. I know for my kids at home, many times they get frustrated because they work really hard and don't get that feedback from the teacher. And we all know how important that is, but you showed or modeled a really great way for teachers to do that. So thank you. I'm going to take your ideas, if that's okay, and share it with some of our JCPS teachers.
Someone also put on here that organization is key and students know what to look for. So you intentionally, thinking about as a teacher before you roll something out, have to teach them the tool too a little bit. This is how, you give a comment in, Google Slides. This is what to look for. I'm going to tag you in it. This is, how you access, those comments. And so I think that that's also an important part of all of these digital tools, as well as thinking about as a teacher that tech side too. And you did that naturally. So your students know the expectations and how to get to that feedback or how to access that assessment as well. So something else you did a great job with. All right, well, without further ado, we're gonna move on to Classkick with Miss Andy Marks.
All right, my mic should be on. Let me get my screen sharing going. Good morning, everyone. Okay, Classkick is a tool that I've used for a few years now. I love it for in the classroom. I loved the opportunities that it was going to provide me when we were doing distance learning as well. So I'm kind of going to speak to both since we have a variety of settings. Why I got started using Classkick is it's great for engagement. All the students have an opportunity to respond. And anytime I'm using technology, I'm looking for opportunities to extend my reach as a teacher. Maybe it puts me in two places at once, which it can do very, very readily with Classkick. When we were working in NTI asynchronously with just assignments for the day, students could still have my support because Classkick is particularly great with the ability to drop in recorded comments. So I could have multiple directions or a vocabulary term and have multiple places for the kiddos to click play and get the information read to them, which was helpful for parents. It's particularly useful with littles. So I knew they had the support, like in the classroom. I would envision what would I have done in the classroom. I would have gone to that kiddo's desk. I would have sat with them. I would have read to them. I would have asked them questions. So by anticipating that, I could build in all that audio support and they could use it as needed. It's also a great way to document work because if you can see on the slide that I've got open now, this top grid-like picture is different slides and each row is a student. So if I'm looking at the columns, that's the slide and the problem. And if I'm looking across the rows, I'm seeing one student's work. So I love to have an iPad open when I'm working with the kiddos because I can very easily slide through this view and track progress, see if someone's stuck. Presenting it is also just a side benefit. And you have kiddos who have focus issues, when you have kiddos with anxiety issues and concerns, it's not an overwhelming giant blank page. It's one problem at a time, one piece of reading at a time. So for students who benefit from work being chunked, it allows me to do that for them. And it's very easy for me to duplicate assignments and adjust them differentiate from there as well when I'm trying to adapt my instruction. So it's really flexible. I wanted to show this example from NTI. And I'm got the volume up. Let me click the volume on. You can hear I'm working with one kiddo in this example. And she's feeling songy and feeling musical. She's building a math problem. She was working off of a Chromebook. Why did you change colors? Tell me why your colors are different now.
Because if you have the same colors, people are not going to know what the number sentence is or you're with.
You're right. So that's a really quick snippet from NTI that is just like, it was just this lovely moment. I'm alone in my classroom, but I'm really talking with the student. I know what she's thinking. I can see her actions as she builds her work. This particular slide also highlights the flexibility because you can see that there are manipulatives that can be dragged. I had to think about little learners with different tools. Most of my kids were on Chromebook, but I had some kiddos on parents' laptops. I had 1 or 2 kiddos on iPads. I couldn't presume that everybody had a touch screen. So I needed to make sure I was approaching things. Unlike when I used it only in the classroom, I knew everybody was on an iPad when I gave it to them. I needed to have the option during NTI of click and drag or write. So the students loved having that choice. I gave them layers of tiles and manipulatives that were virtual. I gave them distractors for this particular piece of work. They might have had 3 color counters. I wanted to see, will they really stick to 2 colors? Because I want them to transfer the idea of if I have 2 add-ins, each add-in, each part of my problem, should it look different visually? We would have drawn it that way in class. So they had the choice of drawing, they had the choice of dragging, and they had a nice line where they could build the number sentence and work through. So I did this a lot with small groups earlier in the year when we were working through math problems together, and it allowed me to focus in on specific problems. I also intentionally did that because I knew based on our timing that it was highly likely I was going to need to give an assessment for the end of a unit while we were virtual completely. And so I initially taught live from Classkick, and then they saw me use the tools. And then we used it in small groups where we were doing kind of math clinic times separate from our live lesson together. So I might have used it a live lesson for them to watch. I used it in small groups for them to work with me and practice having an extra tab open, because that's a whole game changer for my little friends. And they worked really well with it. This is the view that you would see. These are not actual students' names. This is a Classkick visual, but here's another example of how you can see the rows. The gray slides let me know they haven't gotten there yet. I can see their active slide where they're on. If they are on at the same time as me, a little window pops up on their screen that says teacher is helping, so they know I'm there looking. When you look up at the view work tab, I'm able to assign it to multiple rosters. So I have assignments from last year that I can open, adjust, and assign to my roster this year, which is also great. Like any time I invest in this now benefits me down the road and my future students as well. I can see if they're moving too quickly or too slowly by looking at the class view, but I can also come up and click view one slide. I can then see a grid of the whole class and their work on problem number 1, or switch back to this full view. So there's a lot of, like, once you get to know those tools, I can filter out who's actively on the assignment, who's ever been on the assignment, and who's never logged in, so that I can narrow down the view I have by using the filters option and using what I'm viewing. And I can easily switch to which group I'm working with within these teacher tools up top, which is fantastic. All of this comes together to give me the opportunity for timely, detailed, intentional feedback, which is ultimately the goal. If they're live with me, they can talk with me while they're doing it. And if they're not, I can still go back and see and leave them information. Other ways that I use it, I just wanted to share some other examples. We all have that issue where you have this great, important, foundational laying lesson, and then 2 kiddos were sick. That happens. Or you have to teach at a time when 1 kiddo needs to be in an intervention meeting. So this is a time when I put a read aloud in Classkick that was content related, and I could have those students hop on at another time and listen to it, and then be ready to discuss with the class. So it's great for asynchronous work, but it also really, in person, we do asynchronous work, or we need to play catch up sometimes. I can share it easily with ECE staff if there's students that need different modifications. That's a matter of me setting up the base assignment and then copying it, and I can rename that adjusted slide if there's a student that has oral native language support or anything like that, then my ECE partners and co-teachers, my EL teachers don't need to start from scratch. They can come in and add their support to the existing assignment, much like they would if they walked into the classroom to co-teach. Another way I use it that I would use both in person and virtual is through formative assessment pieces. I need to monitor things like sight word progress with my learners. And I can certainly administer that, and I have in the past, but if I have it set up in Classkick and they know how to use it, I don't need to administer it, but I still get the data. So this is an example of where I would be teaching. This is just a picture. These aren't actual students in my class, but I would be at the small group table teaching, and another kiddo would get this little sheet of paper with the QR code. And then they can, beginning of the year, one of the first things I do is teach all the kids how to do QR codes. They can scan the QR code, go right to the sight word level C, press play, and write on this, they have this little sheet of paper. They're going to write their words in the boxes and pop it in my turn-in tray. And I will look at it, and then I can give them new practice words. And the entire time I've not needed to stop teaching a small group, they can continue. I'm continuing to teach, but I'm also reading words to another student. So that's another time where I find Classkick to be hugely valuable. If I needed a bilingual version, once again, that would be copy the assignment and add that recording, which is great. And then I can also pull parent support in from home because I can say, hey, they mastered list B, here's what I need them to work on next. And I can have that all happen more regularly.
So Andy, I want to jump in here. You said something and you just kind of went over it. Basically, you found a way to clone yourself in the classroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you've got multiple teachers because you have preset this in Classkick. So I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for clarifying. Like, I will give them, they have a little station folder. So I sneak the paper in their folder and they know to check that and pull it out and do it. If I was virtual, then I would have pushed this assignment out through Seesaw to the students that needed to complete it, because that's much like the person who was mentioning how Bullitt County used that primary, Oldham County has done that as well. So I can push Classkick assignments out through Seesaw, you can push it out through Google Classroom, and then they can complete it that way. And what would be happening in my room is a reading recovery teacher comes in. So if it's guided reading time, there are 2 teachers, each running lessons. So half the class is in a small group lesson, half the class is doing station work that could include the sight word assessment. And the entire time, the certified teachers and an aide are providing in-person help without taking their time to do the assessment, but I still have the accurate information. So that's been great. Since I'm a first grade teacher, I did also just want to be able to share what this might look like in an older classroom. This slide is an example of a 5th grade assignment that was shared by the team here at LaGrange. And it was a co-teaching classroom with an EL cluster. When you look at the pictures of the assignment, you see all these green triangles. Each one of those is a different recording. That is each a different audio piece. And the students all know that EN means that's an English recording and SP means that's Spanish. So no matter who you are in this class, if you can read it independently, that's what you do. If you need it read to you, you click the language you need it read in, and you can see the text and listen to the text so that you're getting that auditory and visual learning opportunity. And you can even do simplified language as an ECE response. I just really like how you can adapt so easily. So they would have then completed their, this was an assessment in 5th grade, and they would have circled, they would use, there's drawing tools, much like the kids are used to using in other platforms. It's pretty similar. So if they've done something with drawing tools in another platform, this is pretty intuitive for them once they know which icons to click. And they would circle their answers, and then the teacher can go back in and do that assessment and score that. So that's what it might look like in an older classroom. This is a new thing that I did this year. This was in person, but I was thinking ahead to, had I still been virtual and it was time to do geometry, 3D shapes was going to be tricky in my head. Like, what am I going to do? So virtual manipulatives were fantastic for this. And in this example, we were in person, which was fantastic. So I had one kiddo who really needs to be hands-on. So I intentionally chose a kiddo who needs to be hands-on, who loves to be the teacher's partner. He came up and was building with physical blocks. And we gave him a little office because he does not care to have his work peeked at. And then everybody, it was like riddles. So we had already gone over shapes, and I'm reading the riddles. These are the little thumbnails of the slides. This is the student view in the large blocks. And I'm telling them what I'm doing. My friend is doing it with physical blocks. Everybody else was in partnerships. I'm not one-to-one. So they were all in partnerships. And what I've done this year with COVID is I'd say driving. So somebody's driving the iPad and somebody's the thinking partner, and everybody's supposed to choose. So we practiced using a floaty finger. So only one person actually was touching the iPad, but you'll see in the picture with the two kiddos' hands, one person was actually moving, but the other person knew to use their floaty finger and kind of say, this is what I think we should do. So 100% of the kids in the room had a way to participate. They were given clues. They had to know to move I put the table in, and then they had to build on their table and share. So there were set things to practice, and then I could walk the room the whole time because everybody was engaged. I was able to circulate and provide feedback this entire time. Had we been virtual in a meet, I would have been able to click through. I could easily share examples of student responses to still spotlight good thinking and great work. We did a big drum roll and reveal and lifted up the fancy manila folders to see if they matched up. And then I could ultimately show them a completed picture digitally as well. So we had lots of ways for them to check their own work, to confer with each other and do student to student feedback, as well as get my feedback. And then what I want to build towards that we did some this year was I added a slide whenever they get any new tools, whether it be using Classkick or using these virtual manipulatives, they need time to just use them. So there was a free form slide that we used just to practice, but also then they had the opportunity to go back, and I could then, next year what I want to do is give half the class physical manipulatives, half the class iPads. Everybody can put dividers up, and they can practice really using their math vocabulary, give their classmate a riddle and go switch the parts back and forth. So lots and lots of feedback, and we had a lot of engagement. I mentioned at the beginning or earlier that particularly with littles, but I think anyone, I made it a point to use Classkick for the little chunk of in-person we had at the beginning of the year. But using it from home, I knew was still a learning curve. So we did morning meetings live, and this is a would you rather activity that I put in Classkick. So if the tech didn't work that day, if somebody had grumpy connections from home that's out of my control, nobody needed to stress out because it was on my screen and they could share with their mic. But they all got to practice, let me open a different tab, let me circle my answer. They could drag a transparent disc, they could use the drawing tools that you see here at the top, and draw or highlight what their answer was. So they had a lot of options. And then I could share the screen in the Meet for various students. So we had a lot of engagement and reinforcement. And if anything went south, I could share it and we could do it all like it was just a plain old slide. So it gave me a lot of flexibility with getting them used to it. And this was all intentionally done before I headed into small group math work and knowing I wanted this as an assessment option. So other simple ways for them just to see you using the tools and picking selectors are really, really helpful. And I do this in person as well. A lot of what we would do in person works well with NTI. So one of the things in terms of feedback on Classkick that I found along the way is that you can actively go in. I could go, if Dr. White was my student and she's working on a slide and I see her making her number sentence and I want to kind of prompt check your symbol, or I can hop on the slide and type to her, reread your sentence and check the symbol. There's stickers you can add. So I always have a little, and you can customize. So I can click on and add a B that says, be careful. I get to choose the text that goes with the B. And be careful if I want somebody to go back and check their answer or rethink it. That can all be happening live. And Classkick, I believe, just rolled out a sticker wand. So you might say, I want the whole class to know that we're all set with this. So I could push a sticker out to everybody at once. And then they get the little, littles love sticker feedback, but I can type feedback. I can write feedback if I'm working on an iPad. If I want to write the problem on a drawing tool for them so they can see me do that, that can be done as well. And I could be sitting, if there's distancing needs, I can be across the room working on their screen. from a whole other spot. But what I have done to make it really clear is I tell everybody that I'm the only one that gets to use green, which is a silly little thing, but it's hugely helpful because they know if it's green text, if it's green drawing stuff, Miss Marks is adding to my screen. So right away they know that that's what's happening. And when I do the assignment slides, I make sure not to use green. So they know green is me adding information and it draws their attention. Students also have the opportunity to ask for feedback. They have these please help and please check options on their screens, whether they're on a Chromebook, iPad, laptop, there's places for them to click or tap. And I get notifications in my teacher view. And it's basically like you're signing up in line for a turn to confer with the teacher. And I can just work through those things. The other thing that can happen and has happened in person a number of times, I can see, holy moly, like half my class is wondering about number 5. Let's just do a little check-in. So I can adapt the lesson right away and see there are too many people with questions about this particular concept. Let's do a little reteaching and then let's release again and see how that goes. I have pulled small groups where I need to be more concrete and had my middle of the class, ability-wise, or high students work on Classkick and then monitor their progress with an iPad while I worked with my intervention friends. But Lauren and I, when we were talking, I was thinking, what occurred to me when I was going through this presentation is another thing I might do is switch that up. Because if I was doing Classkick with my intervention kiddos, we are keeping the documentation while we work. So we could have those back, the record is already there then for an ARC meeting, for a parent conference, for all that. So it's pretty efficient from that standpoint as well. This is a link to the video that's embedded here, and I know that the slides are going to be pushed out. It's just a Classkick video that is a great reference for how to use feedback with lots of students, but I'm going to scooch past it. Knowing that you can go back. I also added the Classkick video that teaches you how to customize stickers because there is a way to use GIFs, to change the text. So you can make it what works for the words you use with your class. And here's a visual example of what I was talking about with adding stickers. You can select those stickers and put the text that goes with them, including, I always have a sticker that says completed with teacher support. So like right away, I know if there's a little apple on there that I worked with that kiddo. And if that's something that's part of an IEP, then I'm able to show myself that I'm taking care of those goals. And then they can, this was one thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned. A lot of times if it's, say, I've used it most for math, there are, maybe there's 6 problems with the same directions. Well, teachers' planning time is quite precious. So what I learned along the way was I figure out if there's 6 problems that need these directions, that I'm gonna record a template for that, and then you can duplicate it. So I don't need to record the direction on every slide. If I need that same thing, I make one slide and then add the picture of that problem later. So this example, I probably made like 6 of them, and then I put the problem picture on the screen snip of that because it matched the direction. So it's pretty easy to do the one problem at a time without spending forever on that. Let me scooch past this. And then here's just some tips I already mentioned, that picking a color or some visual to let them know that you're typing on things and it's coming from you is helpful. Remembering the tricks about duplicating, if it's the same directions, if it's put the shell assignment for the main part of your class, and then you can easily copy it and make an enrichment version and copy it and make a simplified version and have 3 levels. The kids won't then have a real ability to tell that. So it's nice and discreet way to provide support if students, just to honor their privacy and respect their learning needs all at the same time. That's pretty easy to do. I wanted to mention roster settings because rosters can be locked or open. And let's make sure that this switches. This again doesn't have actual students' names, but this is a teacher view. It says first grade open roster. If it's an open roster, when they log in, they have their lesson code and they type that, and that takes them right to the activity. Or you would push the link out on Google Classroom or Seesaw or whatever way you push your work out. If it's an open roster, if they're prompted to type their name. I had a kiddo 1 year who could type her name like 4 different ways. And then when I was going in to look at work, it was just like this huge amount to work through. If you lock the roster, then they have to type their name correctly. So that's nice practice for them to do that correctly. And also, if you have some super creative friends who want to make up names, that's not an option for them to do as well. So that could be a management tip that would be helpful. And then I mentioned the filters. On this, I have clicked hide students' names, so they all have cute little animal names. I can also hide offline students. I can hide unstarted thumbnails so that I can really make the view only kids who have opened the assignment and worked on it, or everyone on the roster, or kids who are online right now, and then see what I need to see as I'm reviewing the work. And this is the same place you look at to edit and assign. And I can make all of these assignments shareable and send them out to my team, and they can easily copy and use in their classroom as well. So collaborating with teachers so you can spend your time on student feedback is super easy. Classkick has all the digital tools already done, all these icons. If you were wanting to embed those in directions, then there's a link here. So you can use the actual images from their toolbar. And that's really helpful to have that visual consistency for students, I think. And before I realized they had that, or maybe they didn't have it initially, I was doing my own little screen snips. So I was super happy to have that discovery. If you haven't used Classkick before and you want to see what it is like to experience Classkick, Classkick already has an assignment put together so you can experience it as a student. And this is an open roster that I put together. So this is a code that anybody could use to go in and experience a student lesson that just helps you explore the features and what, and think as the teacher, how could I use this in my room? And it's just a nice quick thing to try out the features. And there's lots of ways to connect on their YouTube channel. Their help center is fantastic and easily searchable. And whenever I'm using a technology platform, frequently I love to follow their socials. Often there's grade level support groups. Like I know I'm in a first grade seesaw teacher group. So I'm seeing ideas that are relevant for my standards and my population, but there's other grade level groups for lots of these platforms, including Classkick, and you can get a lot of ideas or be aware of updates and new features like that. Feedback wand hasn't always been there for the stickers and things like that. So that's kind of a nutshell of what I have done with Classkick so far with my students, and I really look forward to continuing to using this tool. I think it's super flexible.
I just want to jump in and say, I actually have fallen in love with Classkick this year. We had a high school teacher using it, and I hadn't really explored it much. I'd heard about it, but like, if you're like, oh, I wish I had this feature, like Classkick has it. Like, oh, I wish I had, being able to do your voice and the manipulative, like it's great for all ages. So I love it because it's good for littles and it's good for older kids, and it's just a really good tool that you can get a lot of things done with. So I love it.
What I didn't mention that I thought of when you were commenting is you can export student work as a PDF. So when you're thinking about kiddos you need to document information from, or if you just wanted that kind of thing handy for a parent conference, you can go in and export everybody or export one kiddo's work on assignments and have hard copies as needed as well. So it doesn't, the ability to have a paper copy or to be able to share that digitally in a Meet is there for feedback purposes with coworkers and with the students themselves.
I just want to say real quick, and I know my camera's off. I love how the floating finger and your little techniques of pre-thinking prior to and how you connected with your students. That really was an engaging, making sure that they were engaged. I loved that. Some of the things that are just you. So I like that. Thank you.
Thanks.
So Andy, I appreciate you sharing all of your management tricks, your color, your floaty finger, all of those kinds of things. This is just great information for you to share with others. Did anybody have any questions before we wrap things up today?
I didn't have any questions. I just, again, want to piggyback off what you said, Angie, and I look forward to going back and watching this because there was so much good information that I need to digest it and go back and look, and I'm really excited to share with our teachers. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, Classkick has been on my list for a while too, and now seeing it in this demonstration, I'm like, that's going straight to the top because I can see teachers flocking all over that. Being a former kindergarten teacher, if I had known about Classkick when I was in the classroom, I could have saved myself so much time and gotten so much good data from it. So thanks for putting this at the top of my list.
You're welcome. Our kinder teachers love it. They use the sight word. We've kind of actually collaborated on the sight word assessments because we're using the same string of lists. So that's really well. And if you're a school that uses Seesaw, the drawing tools that they use there will just help them hit the ground running in Classkick as well. There's a lot of comparison.
Angie, I didn't see any comments from or questions from the live chat, so just a lot of love, and everybody's excited about all these feedback tools. So
Awesome. Dana, thank you for monitoring that chat, making sure we didn't have any questions in there. So what a great show. And I just want to thank Lauren and Andy and Grace for sharing with all of us today and to helping us work smarter. This has been a very stressful and trying year. So the more that we can share and find ways to make life simpler, the better. So Elaine, I think I'm going to throw it over to you now.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that you guys check out everything on Twitter. I know that we have our Rocking Summer ready for you guys to register for, and that bit.ly is going to be here in the chat for you. I'm also going to step over and let Matt go ahead and give you some information about some things that are going on too.
Yes. So thank you, Elaine. Kind of some bittersweet news here. This is actually going to be my last Kentucky Go Digital that I am hosting on. I have been really passionate about my esports work for the past 3 years, and I've accepted a job with Generation Esports. They actually have 3 leagues. They have a high school esports league, a middle school esports league, and a junior college league. So that means, I'm gone, but that means there's an opening on the digital innovation team here in JCPS, and you could not ask for 11 better people to work with. It's just an incredible team and an incredible culture, and I'm gonna stop talking about it because this is like the first time I've felt myself starting to cry on leaving. So it's been an amazing 2 years with our team, and I think I've been doing Kentucky Go Digital for 4 or 5 years now, so it's just thank you all so much for your leadership across the state. The Kentucky Go Digital leading ladies who put on this show every other week and organize all the summer events and everything, you all are just incredible to work with, and I have nothing but gratitude and love for all of you. So thank you. Go to jcpsky.net. Look for employment opportunities. It's Digital Innovation Instructional Lead is what my job is called. We need an all-star on this team, and you'll be working with 11 other all-stars. So thank you all.
Matt, we're so excited and happy for you. We're going to miss you. I have to say that in this whole group. I'm not even speaking for the JCPS group, just for the Go Digital group. We will definitely miss you. And I'm not sure if Elaine's got a little bit more, but I want to make sure that I do thank Jerry and Kaylee for joining us today as our guest panelists. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really fun.
Yep, thanks for having me. It's great. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys, and everybody have a good day and happy Derby.
We're going to hang that up. We're going to frame in my office.